All right, so welcome to the Iowa Ideas Conference and our session, Protecting Our Elders, Iowa's new elder abuse law, which is within our policy track. I'm your moderator, Tom Barton, Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief and Politics Reporter. So elder abuse became a specific criminal offense under a new law that took effect July 1. The new laws, which establishes criminal penalties, also address theft, assault, and financial exploitation of those over the age of 60. We'll talk about during this hour the impacts the laws are expected to have, as well as why the laws were necessary in the first place. Our time together will include talking with our panelists and addressing audience questions. All of our sessions have closed captioning access, and all of our sessions are being recorded. If you have questions for our panelists or would like to share your perspective, please submit it in the chat, and we will do our best to get to as many as our time and discussion allows. Joining me today are Chantel Smith, an Assistant Attorney General in the Consumer Protection Division of the Iowa Attorney General's Office. Welcome, Chantel.
Thank you.
And we also have Larry Cudgy, a retired federal attorney and board member and past chairman of the Older Iowans Legislature, statewide nonpartisan, nonprofit volunteer organization that works to improve the quality of life of older Iowans. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Robin Mills, Public Policy Director of the Alzheimer's Association for the State of Iowa. Welcome, Robin.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. And Brad Anderson, AARP Iowa State Director. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start with just brief introductions. Chantel, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and work in this area?
Yes, thanks for having me today. I have been with the AG's office now for 22 years. And I have spent some time in the administrative law division as well, which is where my interest really in elder justice started. I've represented, I think, almost every agency that touches the lives of older Iowans, including the insurance division, aging, the ombudsman, public guardian, inspections and appeals. And in that work, I applied for a federal grant for abuse in later life training to end abuse in later life, and was the administrator of that grant for the duration of it. And that really kind of fueled the work that we are doing today. And I continue to represent the ombudsman. I continue to work in consumer protection, dealing mainly with issues affecting older Iowans.
Great.
Yes.
Fantastic. And Larry, can you tell us a little bit about your background and the work of the Older Iowans Legislature and what it's done to raise awareness and prevent elder abuse in the state?
Sure. I was with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Iowa up until I retired at the end of 2011. During that time, I touched a little bit on the area in that I did healthcare fraud cases, as well as some nursing home quality of care type situations. I touched on it at that time, but basically my involvement started after I retired. I went to a summit that was held, and I think Chantel was probably there as well, in 2012, where the issue of elder abuse was discussed. And out of that, there was a task force that came about and did a report in 2012. The legislature then in 2013 did another bill, which formed another task force, of which I was a part of and was a member for the Iowa State Bar Association at that time. And then after that, I got involved with Older Iowans Legislature. And basically, its involvement over the years has been trying to promote legislation that deals with elder abuse, various kinds, but initially financial exploitation, but also dealing with bills, trying to improve the law concerning guardianships and conservatorships, trying to have funding that was sufficient for the purposes of the legal guardian's office, long-term care ombudsman's office. And so it's been trying to support through legislative efforts, working with the legislature as well as various agencies to try to improve the fight against elder abuse in the state.
Great, thanks. And Brad, how has AARP been involved in this issue, and what level of interest has this topic of elder abuse received from your membership?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So I'm the newbie here when it comes to elder abuse. And, we at AARP have been working on this issue since well before I arrived in 2018. And primarily Anthony Carroll, who I see is on this in this meeting, and I need to mind my P's and Q's. So I will try and stick to what Anthony has taught me over the years about elder abuse. But, when I came on board, like a lot of people, I was like, what do you mean elder abuse is not a crime in the state of Iowa? And Anthony would walk me through all of the interests that are that are involved and the political considerations. And I'd come to learn it was a lot more complicated than I think a lot of people think it is when it comes to the interests of law enforcement, banks and credit unions, for example. And of course, like anything in the legislature, there are political considerations and who is introducing your bill, what party, what body are they in? Are they in the Senate? Are they in the House? So all these things had to kind of align before we ended up working with our partners to get the bill passed. And AARP, we played two primary roles. One was education. And so we had Paul Greenwood, for example, last year come in. He's kind of a nationally recognized leader in elder abuse. And he gave a virtual presentation to attorneys who got CLE credits. And we had hundreds of attorneys across Iowa attend. And what he talked about was what types of elder abuse there exists out there, and frankly, the need for a law. The second role we play is grassroots. Of course, AARP has 340,000 members across the state. So we did mailings to our members that had tear-off cards, and we encouraged them to reach out to their legislatures with those tear-off cards and encourage them to pass a bill to make elder abuse a crime. And again, working with our partners, we were very pleased to see that that was signed into law. So it's been a journey, and it's been an education for me, but I can say we couldn't be happier that it's finally a crime, and that people are being held accountable.
Great, sounds good. Robin, people with dementia are especially vulnerable because the disease may prevent them from reporting the abuse or recognizing it. They also may fall prey to strangers who take advantage of their cognitive impairment. What work has the Alzheimer's Association been doing in this space to protect older Iowans who suffer from dementia?
So we are relatively a newcomer to this also. A couple of years ago, we really noticed, especially with the COVID-19, the isolation that those suffering from Alzheimer's and dementias were seeing. And we noticed that the narrow definition of the dependent adult abuse didn't take into account all the different types of abuse that were being permeated against those with dementia. So we hopped on the bandwagon and primarily reached out to our advocates and did mailings and did email campaigns to raise awareness. It was also the major focus of our virtual days at the Hill to make people aware, and we provided speaking engagements in front of the judiciary committees at each of them. So we realized that 62% of those elder abuse cases are people with dementia, and they have been physically abused. And so we wanted to make sure that all Iowans were protected in all different arenas moving forward.
Yeah, I guess, can you talk a little bit about, I guess, the need, the importance for protecting against older abuse in terms of, the percentage of the state's population, how many Iowans are living with Alzheimer's and forms of dementia, and what the projections are going to be given kind of the demographics of the state and its aging population?
Sure. Currently, there are 66,000 Iowans that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and other dementias, and that is expected to grow to 73,000 by 2025. So this is a real issue for those folks moving forward. So.
Okay, great. Again, a reminder that if you have questions for our panelists or would like to share your perspective, please submit it in the chat, and we will do our best to get to as many as our time and discussion allows. As I mentioned, Governor Reynolds this summer signed into law Senate File 522, which sets criminal charges ranging from misdemeanors to felonies punishable by up to 25 years in prison based on the severity of the crime for abusing, assaulting, or financially exploiting a person age 60 or older. And just yesterday, Dallas County officials announced charges in what is believed to be the first case pursued under the new law with tougher penalties for financial exploitation of an older Iowan. Alan Stephen Kessler, 68 of West Des Moines, was charged with one count of theft in the first degree against an older individual. Again, it's a new felony that lawmakers established earlier this year. Kessler has also been charged with ongoing criminal conduct and securities fraud. Chantel, the Iowa Attorney General's Office and the Iowa Insurance Division's Security Bureau were involved in this and started investigating Kessler in April. I know that there's not a lot that you can disclose or share about the case because it's still a pending matter, and authorities say that they believe that that there may be more victims and are asking for people to contact law enforcement if they suspect Mr. Kessler scanned them. But can you talk about I guess how you deal with or handle issues affecting older persons, including elder and independent abuse, and kind of the types of cases you're seeing?
Yeah, I will say that there's always been a lot of these cases, but I have noticed a significant increase in the last few years. And in the last year or two, I would say, I would almost say it's getting out of hand in that we're not set up, we don't have the resources to deal with them. So when they come in, when they come to me, first of all, they are mostly financial exploitation cases. No shocker there. Those are the easiest cases to identify and to report because you typically have a third party who has eyes on the money or who can see what's going on with the money. Also, I think people are more comfortable reporting financial exploitation. Money is easier for us to talk about than physical or sexual abuse. So like I said, mainly they're coming in as financial exploitation. Honestly, when they get to me, you're talking about people who are, for the most part, desperate or angry. They've come to the end of the road. They don't know what else to do. They've asked everyone for help, and they have gotten nowhere. So a lot of my time is spent talking to people about what is going on and routing them to resources and getting those cases to law enforcement and prosecutors, and then of course social services as well. But that's how we've been dealing with them with this new law in place. I'm very curious to see what the changes will be. I'm hoping that they will be positive changes, but we'll see. I think there's going to be a learning curve and there are going to be some bumps in the road. So there will be more of that, people calling and asking, who do I call, or saying, I have reported it, and people are not responding. But that's been my general experience with it, is it's financial exploitation and there's a lot of frustration.
So talking about financial exploitation, in what form, what are some of the examples that you're seeing from that?
Most of them are family cases. I think because of media reports, the public tends to think that stranger danger is the most common form, but really it's family. So a lot of your number one perpetrators are spouses and adult children. When it comes to financial exploitation, we mainly see adult children as the exploiters. And I think that's across the board. Of course, I'm in consumer protection in the AG's office, so we get lots of reports of scams. and I don't like that word anymore, but that's what we get reports of. But when it comes to elder abuse, we are seeing family members and largely adult children.
Okay. And so I guess, what were some of the obstacles you encountered in prosecuting cases of elder abuse, prior to this law being enacted and taking effect? And what's the difference between elder abuse and dependent adult abuse?
I think some of the major challenges we were seeing is, I call it a lack of acceptance of the abuse. So there are a lot of, and this ties into ageism as well, I think, but there are a lot of people who say, these are adults. They can make a decision. They can make bad decisions. If they want to give their money away, they can give their money away. Or responses like, well, I don't have a victim here, because what you'll typically see is in these cases, you'll see that the older person is very reluctant, if not absolutely refusing, to point a finger at a family member, particularly a child. So they would say there's not a victim, or again, there are bad decisions, or the person was going to inherit it anyway. So what's the loss? All just excuses is what we're seeing. And I think on the prosecutor side, a fear that I can't bring this before a jury and make this case because the public is not going to buy it, which is a valid concern. So we were seeing that. In addition, we were seeing everybody routing any abuse victim to DHS for dependent adult abuse. And, you asked what's the difference? Well, dependent adult abuse is handled by the Department of Human Services, now Health and Human Services. That's a very specific and very narrow definition. You have to be a person who has some sort of cognitive or physical impairment. It has to fit DHS's criteria for abuse. And most importantly, the perpetrator has to be a caretaker. Well, in many of these cases, we were seeing that the perpetrators are not caretakers. The person either didn't need the care, or this person was not their caretaker. And we were seeing, as I think I know is the case in Iowa, most older Iowans are capable of taking care of themselves, even those who are abused. So they weren't quite hitting the level that we kind of stereotypical level, what we think of a dependent adult. So DHS was, in some cases wrongly, and they acknowledge that and have been working on it, really working on it. But DHS was rightly rejecting those cases. And then those people would bounce back to us and we would say, well, we don't have anything else for you. You've got to go make your case to the police. And that wasn't working.
Yeah. So to that last point, I guess, what were some of the issues and challenges, I guess, for law enforcement and prosecutors to try and maybe fit those cases into existing general crimes? And what did that mean in terms of seeking justice and restitution for victims and holding perpetrators accountable?
Again, I think there's always this framework of ageism in the background, in my opinion. But I think, you talk about a regular theft case, for example. It's pretty hard for the public, especially a jury, to understand that when a person is unduly influenced, which before this law was passed was not a defined term, not even very well known as a theory. But when an older person is unduly influenced by their adult child, the adult is writing the check. I've seen checks, in the memo, the person even makes a note in the memo, of, basically like, I want to give this money. But people didn't understand that there was influence going on there. There was pressure, there were threats, there was all of this going on in the background as far as dynamics. So when you looked at the case, just laying there on the desk, you think, well, how is this a theft? Theft means somebody took something from me against my will, and it sure looks like this was voluntary. So very difficult for law enforcement to look at those cases and think, gosh, there's something here and I should move forward with it. Same with the prosecutors. And on top of that, these are not typically simple cases. There are dynamics here, and you're talking about most law enforcement in Iowa. We have some PDs around the state that have 3 people. They have 3 officers. So if you take one of them off the street to handle a financial exploitation case or to deal with even a physical abuse case, you've now taken most of law enforcement off the road. And these are not cases where you can come in and out, it's a one-time thing, or, you can go do something else. You really have to pay attention to them. So resources, I think you have to acknowledge resources were an issue.
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah, thank you. I definitely do want to talk about resources, and we'll bring that up a little bit later in this discussion. But for now, I guess I want to throw this to the rest of the panel. I guess, how have you experienced this issue, either personally or through helping others identify and report elder abuse?
Yeah, and I'll kick things off. First of all, as a person who lives in Iowa, I just want to say how grateful I am to have someone like Chantel, who's just so knowledgeable and passionate about protecting older Iowans. And so anyway, Chantel, I always love hearing you talk about this because I always learn something about elder abuse. So thank you for everything you're doing. Whether or not this is elder abuse is pervasive across the state, I want to share some anecdotes and then some data. So first, anecdotally, ARP, we work on all kinds of issues at the state legislature. So we do utility work. We work to lower the cost of prescription drugs. We do, of course, a lot of long-term care work, and these are state issues. And I can tell you, in my years, which are now almost 5 years here at AARP, there have been few, if any, issues that have resonated to the level of public awareness so quickly as this elder abuse law. And for example, when we were doing our state fair work, the theme of our state fair booth in the Varied Industries building was Social Security, yet we had multiple people coming by the booth asking us for information about the new elder abuse law. And that doesn't happen frequently when it comes to our new bills. And Larry, who is on our executive council, may remember we were talking about this bill, and one person on our executive council at ARP said, I want to know how to report elder abuse. Is there any one-pager? And then another person said, oh, I have the same question. And so we gave everyone the one-pager. My mother-in-law, I was out at a Mexican restaurant, and she randomly asked me, she's like, I heard about this elder abuse law, and I've got someone who's really curious about it. How do I deal with this? So I think there just is anecdotally a lot of people who have up till now questioned what is the process for elder abuse, and hopefully that becomes more streamlined. And frankly, that's one of our jobs at AARP, is to make sure people have the education they need to report elder abuse. Now, those are anecdotes. Data, we don't take intake for elder abuse cases, but we work with a lot of people like Chantel and others who do intake for elder abuse cases. And one of them, I had a conversation recently with our AAA here in Polk County, and I
now
asked them,
just to be clear, when we say AAA, we're talking about the Area Agencies on Aging, correct?
Yes, and I apologize for using an acronym.
Okay.
I would always criticize people that use acronyms and of course I've become that guy. So thank you, Tom, for that. Yes, the Area Agency on Aging. And of course, we have, they're regional, and we have one here in Polk County and in central Iowa, and they do intake for elder abuse. And so I asked them, what is it like? Has there been an uptick since the law passed? And she said there has definitely been an uptick in interest and in cases, and they get about 40 to 45 cases a month through their AAA. And so this question of, is it pervasive? If you're talking about one intake measure through one AAA getting 40 to 45 cases per month, the answer is yes. Elder abuse is pervasive, unfortunately. And, again, this is why we considered it such a top priority to get this bill passed. And as I said, we have to do a much better job as a state and everyone, including AARP, of getting the word out on what the reporting structure is, and how to make sure that these cases get taken care of.
Great. Larry, Robin, your thoughts? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, and Brad just touched on it a little bit. I'm on the board of directors, serve as a senior advisor to the local area agency on aging out of Cedar Rapids that serves the 7-county area surrounding Cedar Rapids. And I also serve on the Elder Rights Committee for that organization. I've been on the advisory council, and I just can't speak enough about all the things that they do to help people with elder abuse and the kinds of cases that they handle on a day-to-day basis. And it is a situation where the staff is continually working harder and harder and seeing a lot more cases. I agree with that. And they're sad cases. They can't get into details with us, but there are situations where somebody will clean out an elderly person's bank account before Christmas and they have no money for food. And so the elder rights specialist is sitting there, and we have some temporary funds we can use to help them out, and or pay their rent or things like that. So there's a lot of sad situations out there, but I think also it's important, and they've taught me this, that it's not just financial abuse that is considered elder abuse. There's also emotional abuse, neglect, self-neglect. Yeah, so there are a lot of different kinds of abuse that are out there. And so they've kind of taught us how to, some of the things that they tell us on how to identify those people that are being abused has been very helpful to me, and it's been helpful as we approach legislators through the older Iowans legislature to try to convince them that this isn't really an issue that needed some criminal penalties to really make it stick.
So for the Alzheimer's Association, we have a 24/7 hotline across the United States that people with dementia and their families can contact for all sorts of problems. And they've seen a significant uptick also with elder abuse issues. Anecdotally, I had a friend from church whose mother lived in Southeast Iowa, and she called me just desperate because her brother drained the bank account, and this mother had Alzheimer's, and she had no idea how to apply for Medicaid. She had to move her here and then figure out the whole process of trying to get her mother into long-term care with no assistance and no funding, and that whole Medicaid process can be overwhelming. So we spent a lot of time together, kind of walking through that system, and I tried to get her in contact with people that could assist her in getting that taken care of. So it's just pervasive everywhere, and our hotline proves that.
Okay. Are there other states that serve as a good example to model? And if so, how are they handling elder abuse, and how could we implement something similar?
Well, I'll address that. I'm trying to think of a tactful way of saying it. I will say, when I attend conferences addressing these issues, I'm reluctant to go because I think I'm not going to be okay with this. And when I leave, that's how I feel, is we are all in the same boat and nobody has it figured out. You hear the same stories. I was just at a conference, and I think nearly every state was represented, and it was days. 8-9 hour days of hearing the same stories. You couldn't differentiate between the states. Nobody has figured it out because it's the same across the board. The issues are the same. The lack of resources are the same. And what we really need, my opinion, and I have urged this, is a think tank, a group of good people who have experience in this area, who are willing to sit down at a table and really talk about it on a global level. It's not just the United States, by the way. It's across the world. But here in the United States, we are all struggling. So when we drafted this law initially, we pulled what we could from different states, but it's a total hodgepodge because nobody quite has it figured out.
So I guess let's get into a discussion about resources. What resources are currently in the state are currently dedicated to investigating elder abuse? And I guess what are some of the limitations of what other resources are needed?
Well, I know that there's a lot of different resources that are out there, and you know, that's in part that was somewhat of the problem in the past, in that Iowa's system had so many fingers, people didn't know where to go. You know, if a person's in immediate danger from elder abuse, the 911 system and law enforcement is the way to go. But if you're looking at situations in like a caregiver, a dependent adult, in-home type abuse, then there is DHS has a hotline, a 24-hour hotline that you can call and report that. If it's in a long-term care facility that there's some kind of abuse taking place, again, there's another hotline that's out there and available through the Bureau of Inspections and Appeals. And if you don't know where to go, there is a lifelong links number through the Iowa Department of Aging that's a 1-800-1866 number that can be called and they get you out to this local area agency on aging to kind of direct you where to go with the situation and help you through this process. So we have a lot of different resources, but it's a matter of coordinating those resources to effectively deal with the situation. And really comes down to that when people have encountered it, or have seen it in others, they don't really know what to do. And I think that's an important thing, that we have to educate people. 10 years ago, I had no idea that there was even such a thing as a AAA out there, you know, other than the Auto Club and what they really do. And so you have to get the word out and kind of watch for those signs as far as abuse goes.
Tom, I'll just offer too, and I was going to put this in the chat, but I noticed the chat is disabled. If you just Google AARP Iowa and elder abuse, we have a great landing page that does offer some specifics about what the new bill does, some simple language. Offers a great tutorial with Chantel and Anthony Carroll, and they kind of walk through some of the specifics. In addition to that, it has links, Larry, to each of the AAAs that you had mentioned. So good resource. Oh, looks like I can just put it here in the chat now. But good resource to keep in mind.
Great. So Chantel, can you talk about how the elder abuse is investigated in Iowa and the resources dedicated to that? You talked earlier about most of it goes through DHS, but that state agency, for the most part, is more set up to deal with the dependent adult abuse side of things and maybe not elder abuse.
Yeah, and DHHS has been a great partner for us over the last few years, and certainly has been working on educating themselves about elder abuse as well, so they can refer those cases out and know to refer those cases out. But when it comes to investigation, you're really talking about law enforcement. That's who investigates these cases, law enforcement. So, DHS, their workers are just looking at I guess we would call it the civil side, but the protective services for these individuals. They are not cops. They don't investigate cases. So again, we're going down to the local PD level, and they're not equipped for that. They're not set up for it. Like I said, you have PDs that have 2 or 3 people in them, even in our larger counties, even when you're talking about Polk County, even the Des Moines area, for example, or Iowa City or Cedar Rapids, some of those eastern cities, they're not equipped for it either. These are people who already have full caseloads. they're out there investigating all of the crimes that come in. So then when you have an elder abuse case that comes in, there's, for 99% of them, a hard break, right? It's like, oh, whoa, what is this? And how do I do this? And what do I do with it? So we've been providing training, and our intent is to provide more training. But you're kind of dotting the state. You can't hit everybody. And then our approach has been, like we tell law enforcement all the time, you're going out on an elder abuse case, you take an elder rights specialist from the AAA with you. We're trying to get them into team mode so that they don't feel like they have to know everything, that they do have resources surrounding them to help them with the investigation of those crimes. But you got to get them through the door first, right? When they come in as reports, if they're not taken as a report, nobody ever hears about that case. So there are so many layers of it, and so much support that needs to be given to law enforcement, training, education, helping them understand the dynamics of abuse, and helping them resource-wise. For example, a financial crimes case for them, usually, we did a training for law enforcement. I said, what training would you most like? This was an 8-hour training we did for them on elder abuse. I said, what training would you most like us to give you? And the answer was Excel, the spreadsheet, which I sat back and I have an accounting degree. So, I'm thinking, what? That's what they wanted, because they didn't know how to spreadsheet these things. Well, they also don't know that the Department of Public Safety has a person who will scan the financial records and put them in a spreadsheet for them and create pivot tables and do all of these things for them. So, I think it was Larry talking about coordination. It's like running 10 circuses at once. And how do you get all of these agencies spread across the state together and on the same page on an issue like this? So you're just adding and adding complexity to it.
Yeah.
But that's basically how it goes. Is there are a few law enforcement officers around the state who really like these cases. They really get into it, but that's rare. I had a person actually say to me, from DCI, I would rather have 10 bodies piled up in the corner to investigate than one of your elder abuse cases.
Yeah, there seems to be, Tom, a real reluctance to get involved with. So often the report comes from one family member or a friend of the family or something, and then there's a reluctance. They're saying, they kind of write it off maybe as a family feud or a off the farm error being, or somebody kind of that type of a situation where and there's a reluctance to get involved in those situations, and they just kind of tend to write it off, I believe, and that makes it very difficult. I guess the nice thing is that, and this I have to, Chantel, the CCR group that has helped kind of start the coordination between all the various fingers, and they meet, I know, on a regular, I think it's a monthly basis for the most part, to kind of present different kinds of scenarios and exchange information. And that's something that didn't exist, but 2 years ago, I think it started at thereabouts. And so
I think it's been about 5 years now.
Oh,
that's the Coordinated Community Response Team, which we call the CCR. And I lead it, but does it have its issues? Sure. But I have seen significant change since we started the CCR. We have 170 members from across the board. Just the fact that those people now know each other, I can say with absolute certainty, has saved lives. And you had asked earlier, is there a state that's sort of nailing it? And I think we tend to be a humble group. We don't high five ourselves. We don't brag about ourselves, but the feds have featured us, and we get a lot of questions about what we do here in Iowa, particularly as to the CCR. We have the largest CCR in the country. It's unheard of to have 170 members. That's never happened before. But those people coming together and talking has absolutely saved lives. In the past, you would have a person like a law enforcement officer handling something all by him or herself. Now we bring these groups together. They can call each other directly. They are learning about what each other does. They are educating each other. And that is significant. But, we always need more, and we need everyone at the table, and you can't have a CCR. Well, you could. We don't have a CCR of everyone in the state, so that work continues.
Yeah. So I'll throw this to the group. Now that the law has been enacted and we have tougher penalties, criminal penalties for elder abuse, and kind of specific designations for kind of the type of abuse and exploitation that they experience. What do you see as the next steps? What's needed now to be able to take advantage of that new law and kind of actualize it and act on some of the provisions and things that it now provides?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this first. In a lot of ways, we've had some recent experience with, okay, here's X, now educate people how to do Y. And I use the vaccine, when the vaccines came online for COVID as a good example of that. When appointments started becoming available, if you'll remember, not to take everybody back to that terrible time, but when the vaccines were, it was really hard to get one, hard to get an appointment. People didn't know who to call. They were calling AARP until eventually we kind of directed people towards 211, became a great resource, and they partnered with the area agencies on aging, and they were able to help people get those appointments. I believe we are in the same phase with elder abuse. I mean, and Chantel walked through all of the various ways people can intake cases. But if you're a regular person, not on this call, and you see elder abuse happening, it's tough to think through, okay, what's the first call that I should make? And how does this process work? And what steps can I take immediately to protect my loved one? And so I think that is our role right now. We have to educate people as a state. We have to do it in a very coordinated statewide effort. That's number one. Whether or not the new law acts as a deterrent, it's hard to say that is going to happen. But it remains to be said, or remains to be seen. And obviously that would be great if it did. But at the end of the day, people are still going to commit elder abuse. I mean, we know that. And especially, by the way, when you see things like Social Security COLAs going up, which just happened yesterday, when you see stimulus money getting put into people's accounts and debit cards getting sent like we did a couple of years ago to Iowans across the state, that is prime time for opportunities for elder abuse. And so when those things happen, I think we all need to raise our flag and say, okay, well, there are hundreds of thousands of older Iowans that just got debit cards. Let's make sure that they know that's their money, and let's do a little education on if someone is trying to steal it, here are the steps you can take to protect yourself. So, I'm optimistic, but I know we've got work to do.
I think there's kind of has to be a change in the way society views aging, I think. And I know Chantel's touched on this in the past, but this week there was a speaker here in Cedar Rapids, and I unfortunately didn't learn about it until later, but pointing out the fact that the population in Iowa is aging to the point where it won't be that far in the future where there are going to be more people older than there are going to be young people in the state of Iowa. And yet we look at child abuse, and we say that anybody that's abused, we really go after them with a vengeance. it's not the same. That's not the same attitude that I perceive anyway when it's elder abuse or elder prevention. It's just not the same. There's a difference the way people perceive it, and I think there has to kind of be a change in the way people look at treating the elderly in the state. They're kind of just out there sometimes. The other thing I'm going to mention, and it's something that I think AARP and Alzheimer's, in addition to the older Iowans legislature, will be pushing for. But in the involving dementia, the treatment of people with dementia, there's going to be, I think it's important that there be additional resources for them. And one of the things that's being suggested is a dementia care specialist at the AAA levels and create funding for that. You know, I know Robin with Alzheimer's probably got more information on that, but I know it's something that all three organizations are backing at this point in time, and I think that's important as far as we go forward with that. So
Larry, you're right. That's our top legislative ask for the next year, is that we have a dementia service specialist at each of the AAAs, can really focus on those with dementia, care planning, do some mild cognitive testing, but also pay attention to those with dementia and their families, and possibly see red flags as it has to do with elder abuse. So thank you.
Yeah. To the group, I guess, speaking of next steps, I guess, what role do you foresee the Department of Aging playing within this?
Well, it's going to be interesting.
I think that's.
Go ahead, but I was just going to talk about the Department of Aging. I think there's going to be legislation that it's going to make it part of HHS sometime next year or the year or early the following year. And so how that all develops, I'm not sure at this point in time, but Chantel, your point, I guess.
Well, I think I was kind of going to say the same thing you were, that I think it remains to be seen. Having represented them for years and still working with them, you know, their sole purpose in this state is to advocate for older Iowans. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I hope in the hands of Director Garcia, who is the head of HHS, that there will be more development there, that they will start working together with DHS, for example, on the dependent adult abuse side, and recognizing that there are not clear-cut boundaries here, that a person is a person is a person, and everybody is an individual, and we need to treat them that way, and start looking at, you know, how do we help these people avoid abuse? That's our goal here. You know, Anthony and I talked about it all the time. Yeah, you get the criminal law passed, but your goal is never to use it. Your goal is to not have to use it. So I'm hopeful that with this change and this realignment of agencies, that we'll see more, but you know, that remains to be seen. And aging oversees the AAAs. And I'll say it 100 times, those AAAs are small nonprofits. They are not well funded. Again, small nonprofits, they are busting at the seams, just doing the work that they're doing, going above and beyond. And I personally don't think we can keep putting it on them. So I'm hoping that will be a change that we see in the future as well, either beef them up or get them some help in another form.
So I recently had a meeting with Linda Miller in the department, and their top priority this next year is asking for $300,000 to beef up their public guardianship department office. Right now, it's staffed by one person, and there's over 80 applications on the waiting list. So they're hopeful to add some more staff there and to make sure that those public guardians are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but also that they're trained well to advocate for those people that they're serving. So I know that they're focusing on that area this next year.
Okay. We've I guess touched on it a little bit, but I'm wondering, Chantel, can you talk a little bit more in depth as to what the law actually does, and how it will I guess, do better to try and prevent elder abuse?
Yeah, and I think, you said it at the beginning, it criminalizes elder abuse. So people 60 and above. And what it really, I tell people what it really does that I think is important is introduces concepts to help us understand what elder abuse is. So, for example, defining undue influence and giving the court factors so that it can determine if there has been undue influence. That I think is key. I think that is something that runs throughout most, if not all, of these cases, and that we have been missing. So, just a simple definition can make such a difference. And it does things like criminalizes isolation. We see that a lot of in cases where you think it's a joke, but it's not. Where people are living in houses. Their houses are cameraed up outside and inside. Their cell phones are taken away from them. Their family members are told that the person doesn't want to speak to them anymore, or they are told that their family doesn't want to speak to them anymore. Just atrocious things like that. Well, that is now in and of itself a crime. So, how important, how great is it that we're saying to people, you can't do that. You can't keep a person as a prisoner in their own home and lie to them and use it as a mechanism for stealing and from them and mistreating them. So, there are the small things, if you will, like that. And then overall, we're just saying abuse, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional, those things are now crimes. This is no longer an issue of, gosh, is your name going to be on the registry, which is important, but it's bigger than that. And now we're saying when you steal from someone, when you abuse them, there are significant penalties for it, which I hope is a flag, is a marker for the public to say, look, this is serious. And we do take this seriously, and we value older people in Iowa. We don't discard them. We don't decide, you just don't bring anything to the table anymore. I hope this is a statement to Iowans that we do value Iowans regardless of their age. So, it's the typical criminal stuff. I don't want to downplay it. There are many aspects to it, but I hope that is the message people receive is we will not tolerate it.